So we continue to explore what it means to be a consumer, but by looking at this through the omission of the question of our production process. Today we're going to explore this through existential arbitrage, or essentially the primary trade that we engage in when we're given as consumers. And so the production process is different compared to products, because you're dealing with a form of life. And so therefore, when you're exploring this process, it's not as easy to discern when there's a lot of things that we just accepted as a given. And so the primary one is that time is of value. So we need to explore what that entails for us, and so therefore pass out that totalizing claim by perhaps maybe looking at it what we would through the marginality of our time, or the labour and leisure, and the way how they can be reconciled through the absence that is ever present. And so this will be a way of framing modern life, perhaps in a way that you haven't otherwise understood it. Why? Because we are the product of civilization. A consumer is produced, and so therefore if questions of economy can be reduced down into a form of life to sanction the way how things are given, it's incumbent upon us to understand exactly how this occurs. So what do we know of arbitrage or arbitrage trades that relates to, say, finance? This is where the same asset can be bought and sold simultaneously in order to profit from discrepancies of the price between one market compared to another. And so this ensures that any difference in price cannot persist over a certain amount of time, because ultimately that difference is what attracts the trade to cancel it out. So theoretically, fair value is attained because it equalises it out across markets. Existential arbitrage is completely different, because when you're dealing with a totalizing claim made on time, and we don't give that the due consideration that we need to, well, it's problematic in the sense of what we presuppose for life, because in financial arbitrage, it's considered a risk-free proposition, because a price is lower in one market and you can sell higher in another, and so as a result of that, you're always going to generate profit, and so therefore the risk associated with the trade is minimal to non-existent. Existential arbitrage is completely different, because we're beholden to the marginality of our time, and as a result of that we externalize. But we externalize a risk that we can't reconcile with our own actions, that is as totalizing as the claim made on time is. And so if we're looking at the current paradigm now, this is the way how that we can frame developments within, say, civilization at large, that relates to the requalifying of credit, or the resetting of credit, that relates to money. People are familiar with programmable money, what that means. But if you don't connect it to the form of life of the consumer, then the critique that a lot of people present does not go far enough, when once again you're not looking at that question that we refuse to ask when we're given as consumers. And so the way that we do this is quite easy. To be given as a consumer, you credit a limitation of agency. So, but that's at the same time, there's an absence of agency that you are credited, let's say, that you're not cognizant of when that occurs. So a consumer, we can only demand, and as a result of that, we're orientated towards the marginality of our time to make good on our time the way how we see fit, when a totalizing claim of a buyer's journey has been set for life. And as a result of that difference in agency that we're credited, well, that is the absence that's forever present when you're given as a consumer. You're not credited creativity to the degree that you need to become aware of when you obviously know the way how that you produce yourself. And so that absence of agency or that absence of creativity is what substantiates the value that we presuppose. Because we talked about this prior, is that if anybody was to question whether or not time is valuable or not, then we would regale against that. We would find that that is an imposition perhaps of some kind of collectivist creed, or that we are undermining our very sense of agency, obviously when we presuppose it as much. But if we're orientated towards the value of our time or the marginality of it, the marginality of our time or the means or end, the way how that we would look at it, is always reconciled beyond what we do, because that time that value that we presuppose for time obviously is the value associated with that is the means of our is the means of our production. So time given as an economic good. So if you're focused on the marginality of your time, so that would be time as labour. Well, your labour is an economic good, but you securing your leisure is no less the economic good for doing so. So if time given as labour and time as leisure are both economic goods, well, what's transcendent to your life? Obviously, on a buyer's journey, you're orientated towards life through becoming a customer, but business is sold on the consumer first. So the consumer is primary. It is the primary product because that you're given as, and so therefore you recede as a person. And so what happens is that we get sold on the surrogate that the consumer becomes, that literally stands in our stead, because we work with this equivocation. But if we're working with an equivocation, we presuppose too much in that case, because why? Well, for the simple fact that we are not questioning our lives right down to the basis of the credit that we use. Hence the reason why credit can be requalified when the form of life of the consumer perhaps is failing, and so because the paradigm is failing, and so therefore requires the resetting of the credit that you use in order to requalify the life that would follow. Obviously the pandemic was an acute example of this, but then we can see the orientation put in train when you couple it with digital IDs and obviously forms of rationing that would come with programmable money. But once again, if you work back, well, irrespective of the means of exchange, you're credited as a consumer. You can only demand. Then within that whole paradigm is the absence of creativity. So it works on the basis of not questioning to the degree that you need to make obviously that explicit. So the absence is what is telling here, because then that legitimizes the value that we associate with our lives, but then there's a value judgment or a claim, a truth claim that's been made on time that works through the marginality of our time. So we're already sold on life as a buyer's journey because we don't question it, and so therefore we're already sold. So we're always sold, and so that means to say that our buying is always done when we're sold. Obviously you can't sell a person if they're not sold on the whole way of life prior. Hence the reason why money markets a way of life to legitimize its use, to maintain that it's the leveraging that it allows. And so the absence of creativity is the thing that you need to focus on, that reconciles what would be arbitrage or the risk-free. Because when we're looking at risk-free proposition, to risk is to risk life beyond a buyer's journey, and that's ultimately what we need to explore when we're looking at arbitrage, because we are given as we presuppose our lives as being risk-free, but they're not. And so we'll cover that off, and obviously existential arbitrage in more detail in the ensuing episodes. Cheers.